Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama on Rajya Sabha Television with me, Frank Pereira. Over the next half an hour or so, we're going to bring you a roundup of all the significant events that have taken place across the world in this particular capsule. But let's begin, as always, with the headlines. Amid widespread protests across the US over police brutality, another unarmed black teen shot dead by an officer in Arizona. Barack Obama calls for calm. Global warming efforts falling short. United Nations expresses concerns at the rising levels of greenhouse gases at the climate change summit in Lima. India says developed countries should compensate. Russian President Vladimir Putin to visit India next week for the 15th India-Russia summit. He will hold bilateral talks for the first time with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Phillip Hughes' funeral takes place in his hometown, Maxwell, Australia. Remembers the batsman who tragically lost his life, aged 25. The world pays tribute to the departed soul. Our top focus on the bulletin this week. The United Nations expressed concerns at the rising levels of greenhouse gases at the climate change summit in Lima. Head of the UN Climate Change Secretariat, Cristina Figueres, said pledges to curb global warming won't be enough but will create basis for tougher action in the future. She added that it was unrealistic to expect miraculous solutions, which is why they are setting modest expectations for greenhouse gas cuts. Governments agreed in 2010 to limit global warming to 2 degrees Celsius. The long-term goal is to reach climate neutrality or reducing greenhouse gases to zero by the end of the century. The urgency about the Lima conference is heightened by the World Meteorological Organization declaring 2014 as the hottest year on record. Land and sea global average temperatures as well as sea levels for the first 10 months of this year are the highest ever recorded.
Every time with increasing ambition, such that every time the gap between what science says where we should be and where we are, that gap will get smaller and smaller until we reach the ultimate objective of decarbonization, which is climate neutrality in the second half of the century. But we're not going to get there with the Paris Agreement, with the numbers that will be there next year. We will get there over time.
Meanwhile, Environment and Forest Minister Prakash Javadekar has spoken to the media, and he said that India won't sacrifice growth to fight climate change. Before his departure to the Peruvian capital Lima to participate in the UN Climate Conference, Javadekar said that poverty was the worst kind of environmental disaster which needs to be eradicated, and no one should dispute the poor's right to have access to energy. The minister said that he was going to Lima with an open mind, but added that India would not shy away from a tough debate. However, he clarified that India would not follow an energy-intensive developmental model.
We are not sacrificing any growth target. On the other hand, we are convincing the world that the moment we grow, the world will be much better, and therefore our growth is very imperative. Poverty eradication is imperative, and to that end, we must grow, but we'll grow with on energy efficiency path. We'll grow not on the business as usual path, but we'll grow on energy efficiency path, which will lessen the burden of pollution in the world.
Well, joining me for a chat this week on the program is Chandra Varshney, former Dean of the School of Environment Sciences, JNU. Thank you for joining us, Professor, and welcome to the program. Professor, let's talk about the climate change now, and let's talk about whether, countries are willing to give up their growth perspectives really to ensure that the climate is better for you and me.
You see, the point is this, that the science has shown very clearly that the present trend, if continues, then we are heading for a very major disaster. And recovery from that will perhaps be impossible.
Yes.
And this will be a disaster not for a country X and Y, but it will be a global disaster. And therefore, it is our joint responsibility to really take the signal which the science has been really giving loud and clear, and to really act according to the dictates of the science. You see, the point is this, that the West is addicted to the luxurious living style, which is energy intensive, not energy intensive, but energy, it uses profligately.
Yes.
And therefore, it really emits lots of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. So I think in this scenario, it is in the interest of the all to really take care of this important situation of global warming by reducing carbon dioxide consciously and making deliberate effort by modifying our way of life. Because
but who's going to take the lead to go ahead and do this? Because see, we have a climate summit every year, nothing comes out of it. You know, they say we're going to do this in the year 2014, we're going to do this by the year 2020, something else by the end of the century, but no one seems to be taking concrete steps.
I think here the most responsible part is on the part of those who are issuing and emitting the maximum of carbon dioxide. I think they are really reluctant and are creating all kinds of hurdles and arguments in order not to change their way of life and the life to which they are addicted. There are a number of things which they are required to do. For example, they have a historical responsibility of really correcting this, and therefore they must provide a certain amount of free access to the technology and the new green technology for the people which are in developing countries, which have yet to really grow, because they also need a parity, and parity in terms of equal carbon space. Because if they are occupying all this space, as you have said, and the science has dictated that only 2-degree window we have, which means that the amount of carbon dioxide which the global community can really spew in the environment is limited. And if the major portion of that is already taken care by them, and if they are incorporated or they have really appropriated, then I think we are left in a situation where permanently we will be in deprived condition. So I think we have a legitimate right to really claim the carbon space which we are really claiming.
Yes.
And for that, I think they must come forward and make drastic reductions. I mean, you see, last month or so, they have US and China has shown some kind of an agreement. Now, these agreements are far too short of what they are required to do, because China is the largest.
But is it at least a start?
It's a start, but a too poor a start, only to really save a very severe criticism at the global meet. And I think it is only bilateral. It must be then tested at the global level, that what does it mean in terms of really addressing the real issue which the global community is facing.
But I think the real problem is none of these countries want to give up on their growth ambitions, because even we heard what our environment minister had to say a short while ago. Even he said the same thing. India is not willing to give up on its growth ambitions.
Absolutely. And this is not a question of ambition. It is a legitimate growth that we need in order to really address the poverty and the deprivation which this country has been suffering because of the global policies that West has followed, or the community of the nations have followed. So I think this correction and this corrective is imperative, and this must be really pursued. And I think the country must, our people must really going to emphasize that we need parity. That is an important. And how do we operationalize this parity must be now time to really put in words and agreement. And you must agree that this is a dialogue which started in 2011 from Durban, and it is continuing. So there is no firm commitment that are required now.
Indeed.
But what is required is that at this time we have to prepare a text for the next year, that is in 2015, in the Paris meeting, where finally the things are going to be hammered and inked. And impact and the pact is going to be inked.
Can we expect anything out of it, or is it, is it too difficult to say that we're going to expect a concrete plan?
There is no concrete plan that is envisaged at this conference. This conference is required.
Not at this conference, but in 2015, can we envisage anything?
2015, we should expect a good concrete plan, and we must emphasize that this is a time, because the planet is not going to wait for you.
Yes.
Because there is no question of really moving and taking a very casual attitude about it. I think we have already delayed the challenge, and I think it is time that we have to take the bull by the horn, and we must really sacrifice that kind of luxury that we have really enjoyed in the previous years. There are few things that need to be taken care of. You see, the lifestyle is changing very drastically, which has a severe impact on the global climate. And I think one of the reports which have come very recently, that the global consumption of meat is increasing very fast.
Yes.
And I think that also need to be reduced, because this is one of the an important factor which leads to the enough. But then this is a sensitive issue.
Indeed,
and I think nobody talks about it.
Yes, it is a very sensitive issue. We'll have to leave it at that. Very well put, Professor. Thank you so much for joining us on the program and sharing your expert views on this very subject. Thank you for joining us. Let's move on now, of course, and take a look at some of the other big world stories this week. Protests continued for the second day in New York over the chokehold death of unarmed black man Eric Garner. Thousands took to the streets across the US, disrupting traffic and holding sit-in protests. The protests began yesterday following a grand jury's decision not to indict a white police officer responsible for the death of Eric Garner. The United Nations also appealed to the US officials to take immediate action to overlook racism concerns across America.
Hands up, don't shoot! Hands up, don't shoot! Hands up, don't shoot!
I'm angry just like everyone here is.
We're here protesting because the system in America is inherently racist and it targets one class of people. And so we're out here for justice.
Anti-racism protests peaking across the United States for the second straight day. Protesters flooded the streets chanting slogans, blocking traffic, demanding genuine change after the decision not to indict in the chokehold death of Eric Garner. Demonstrators staged a die-in in Brooklyn on Thursday. Black teenager killed in Ferguson, Michael Brown, was also remembered, another victim of racism. In Denver, at least 400 students walked out of Lincoln High School towards the state capitol building in support of protesters in Ferguson, Missouri. As protests continue, the New York mayor promised immediate action. US President Barack Obama applauded his efforts to address public outrage.
People need to know that black lives and brown lives matter as much as white lives. It's what we still have to aspire to. I said it yesterday, I believe it. This is not just a problem in New York City, it is an American problem, an American challenge.
He was just in the White House with us on Monday as we started taking some concrete steps to strengthen the relationship between law enforcement and communities of color, and I intend to take more steps with leaders like him in the months ahead.
Meanwhile, the UN Secretary General appealed to authorities in the United States to tackle the situation as soon as possible.
Secretary General urges all competent authorities in the United States to do everything possible to respond to the demands for greater accountability. And he also welcomes the announcement, I think, by the U.S. Justice Department of an opening of a civil rights investigation in the case.
The protest started after no charges were brought against Officer Daniel Pantaleo for his role in a confrontation that killed unarmed black man Eric Garner. Surprisingly, a union that represents New York City police officers defended the actions of Officer Daniel Pantaleo.
Meanwhile, in Phoenix, Arizona, Romain Brisbane, an unarmed black father of four, was shot to death on Tuesday when a police officer apparently mistook his bottle of pills for a gun. About 100 protesters marched to police headquarters in Phoenix on Thursday, demanding the department release the name of the officer who shot Brisbane. A spokesperson reportedly defended the shooting. Parts of the official police story have been challenged by some witnesses. Well, it's time for a short break on the program right now. Still to come, the world bids a tearful adieu to Phillip Hughes, Australian cricketer laid to rest in his hometown Maxwell. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching World Panorama. Russian President Vladimir Putin will visit India next week for the 15th India-Russia summit. He'll be holding bilateral talks for the first time with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Modi and Putin have had only brief interactions so far, the last being on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Australia last month. This will be their first round of official bilateral talks. Putin is scheduled to arrive in New Delhi on the 10th of December. Besides the India-Russia summit, Putin has been invited to address a joint session of parliament, an honor conferred on US President Barack Obama in 2010. Prime Minister Modi and President Putin are likely to sign some 10 agreements on key issues. The most significant deal on the cards is a long-term vision of their key strategic ties. The two are also expected to focus on boosting bilateral trade, with a big announcement likely on cooperation in rough diamonds. Well, let's now bring you a roundup of all the other significant news developments that have taken place across the world in our segment Globe Watch.
Ten police officers were killed in clashes with fighters who attacked a traffic post in the Chechen capital of Grozny and then stormed a building housing local media. 10 attackers were also killed in the attack. Russia's National Anti-Terrorism Committee said that another 28 law enforcement personnel had been wounded. The bloodiest fighting in Chechnya for months erupted a few hours before President Vladimir Putin said in a speech in Moscow that he would defend Russia against what he called attempts to dismember it. President Vladimir Putin has warned Russians of hard times ahead and urged self-reliance in his annual State of the Nation address to the parliament. Russia has been hit hard by falling oil prices and by Western sanctions imposed in response to its interventions in the crisis in neighboring Ukraine. The ruble, once a symbol of stability under Putin, suffered its biggest one-day decline since 1998 on Monday. The government has warned that Russia will fall into recession next year. US Secretary of State John Kerry has renewed US commitments to invest in Afghanistan and create a powerhouse region after a conference in London. Kerry said he had faith in President Ashraf Ghani to create a strong and prosperous Afghanistan. Ghani was seeking guarantees from delegates that they would continue to invest after most foreign combat forces leave later this month. The current challenge is to sustain and build on the faltering progress that has been made in recent years or risk Afghanistan's collapse back into a much darker state.
Going on now, events were held across South Africa to mark 1 year since the death of Nelson Mandela, including a wreath-laying ceremony and a cricket match. Anti-apartheid movement veterans joined Mandela's widow at a remembrance service in Pretoria. Sirens and vuvuzelas sounded across the country before a commemorative 3 minutes silence was held. South Africa's Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa told the crowd at Pretoria that Mandela taught the world many life lessons, both in death and life. There was a worldwide outpouring of grief when South Africa's first black president died a year ago, aged 95.
In life, Madiba led us on the road to reconciliation. In death, he has shown us the way to unity and to nationhood. We all mourned Madiba's passing with dignity, with respect and love. We celebrated his life, his work, his achievements, and what he stood for and represented, as we are doing today and as we shall do in the future.
It's a very great, important day for South Africans, Africa, and the world at large. We would really appreciate everyone to honor and respect the legacy of the former President Mandela.
Going on now, Phillip Hughes was remembered at his funeral in his hometown of Maxwell as a champion cricketer who never forgot his roots. Australia's Prime Minister Tony Abbott, many cricket greats, the current Australian team and the visiting Indian team were among the thousands who poured into Maxwell High School to pay their respects to the fallen cricketer.
I don't know about you, but I keep looking for him. I know it's crazy, but I expect any minute to take a call from him. Or to see his face pop around the corner. Is this what we call the spirit? If so, then his spirit is still with me, and I hope it never leaves. I walked to the middle of the SCG on Thursday night. Those same blades of grass beneath my feet, where he and I and so many of his mates here today have built partnerships, taken chances, and lived out the dreams we painted in our heads as boys.
Australian captain Michael Clarke bids an emotional farewell to the young man he referred to as his little brother, Phillip Joel Hughes.
Are you smarter than the rest of the team?
I'm probably the dumbest.
The entire Australian team was in attendance, so was the visiting Indian team. Australia's Prime Minister Tony Abbott came. Everyone spoke about how it was time to celebrate a life which, though short, was well lived.
We gathered to celebrate his 26 years of life. That's what we're doing here.
this afternoon. To those both near and far whom his life has touched, and we pray this afternoon that today we will feel some consolation as we celebrate his life.
Stories about how Phillip fell in love with the game were narrated. Facts about his short, well-lived life were told. And it was clear that at 26 years old, he was an inspiration to all those whose lives he touched.
All I ever wanted was for you to look up to me as your big brother. I still can't believe that I'm here saying my final goodbyes. Even though you are my little bro, you have taught me so much. You have given me confidence, strength. You supported me and gave me a strong desire to succeed.
We must dig in. We must dig in and get through to tea. And we must play on. So rest in peace, my little brother. I'll see you out in the middle.
Some 1,000 mourners, mostly locals, dabbed away tears and perspiration in the baking heat of the school hall as thousands more watched on screens in the sunshine outside. Australian cricket greats such as Shane Warne, Ricky Ponting and the War brothers were in attendance, while Richard Hadley and Indian captain Virat Kohli represented the wider world. The service was also beamed to many stadia across the country. As everyone mourned the death of a prolific batsman, the everyday Australian remembered him as just one of them, a small-town kid playing the national sport they know and love.
Over the mountains, we'll go on together to know all the wonders he's given to me.
Well, on that emotional and somber note, let's move on and bring you up to date with the sports news from across sporting arenas across the world. Here's time for our sports wrap. Four-time Formula One champion Sebastian Vettel has branded his first experience of driving a Ferrari like a fairy tale after completing his first days of testing post joining the team from Red Bull. Vettel's Red Bull contract had prevented him from testing for Ferrari at the post-season Abu Dhabi test last week, but he arrived at Fiorano where he drove a 2012 car. On Sunday, Vettel spent a whole day in the simulator before meeting senior Ferrari figures. The Australian Open's extreme heat policy has been changed ahead of the 2015 tennis tournament, and it has been updated to ensure conditions are fair for all players. The tournament's director Craig Tilley said that a roof had been added to a third court and the heat policy had been updated. The extreme heat policy is implemented at the referee's discretion. Once the policy is introduced, play can be suspended at the end of the current set in each match. Temperatures soared above 40 degrees Celsius during the 2014 tournament, causing players to faint or suffer from heat stroke. Brazilian football legend Pelé has been moved out of intensive care in Sao Paulo after being admitted to undergo treatment due to a urinary infection. A hospital statement revealed that he was doing well without medical complications and was lucid and eating well. The hospital has confirmed that the former striker could walk around his room and was receiving semi-intensive care. Widely regarded as the finest player to play the game, Pelé had an operation to remove kidney stones earlier this month. Boxing legend Muhammad Ali recently posted a smiling selfie on his newly opened Instagram account, subduing the talks revolving around his deteriorating health condition. Being an ardent fan of the Louisville Cardinals, three-time world champion Ali was pictured supporting the team. The boxer, who's suffering from Parkinson's disease, has already gained 120,000 followers. Earlier, his brother Rahman confirmed that he was not able to speak or leave his home, indicating rumors regarding his impending death. Let's shift focus now and bring you up to date with all the show business news that has taken place across the world in our end wrap.
Christopher Nolan is all set to receive Art Directors Guild Cinematic Imagery Award at the Guild's 19th Annual Excellence in Production Design Awards. The Inception helmet is one of the creative forces behind a series of blockbusters, writing, producing, and directing Interstellar. The earlier recipients of the award were Martin Scorsese, Warren Beatty, Clint Eastwood, Norman Jewison, John Lasseter, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and Blake Edwards. South Korean pop star Psy's hit single Gangnam Style has crossed 2.15 billion views on YouTube and has forced the site to upgrade its software. The 2012 Peppy dancing number has maxed out the site's original view counter. Google, which owns YouTube, said in a blog that they never thought a video would be watched in numbers greater than a 32-bit integer. YouTube's software engineers saw the problem coming and recently updated to a 64-bit view counter across the site, and now the view counter can go up to 9 quintillion views. Will Smith, Jared Leto and Tom Hardy are set to play supervillains in Warner Brothers' upcoming flick Suicide Squad. The superhero project would be helmed by David Ayer. While Oscar winner Jared Leto has been confirmed to play Joker, Margot Robbie would play his sidekick Harley Quinn. The rest of the star-studded ensemble cast includes Smith as Deadshot, Hardy as Rick Flag, Cara Delevingne as Enchantress, and Jay Courtney as the token Australian Boomerang.
Well, New York's most famous Christmas tree was lit on Wednesday night at the Rockefeller Center, officially kicking off the holiday season. The 85-foot Norway spruce was decorated with more than 45,000 lights strung over 8 kilometers of wire and topped with a Swarovski star. I'm going to leave you this week with visuals from New York. Bye-bye.
I don't need to hang my stocking there upon the fireplace. Santa Claus will make me happy with the toy on Christmas Day. I just want you for my own, more than you could ever know. Make my wish come true. All I want for Christmas is you. Well, someday all the dreams will come to me. Somewhere in a world and free, for maybe not a time for you and for me, oh, but someday at Christmas time, oh, someday at Christmas time, oh, someday Christmas time.